In this video, we will be discussing sexual relationships and gender roles in the context of The Stranger by Albert Camus.
To give some background information on The Stranger by Albert Camus, it took place in Algiers, France during the 1940s. This was a time period where there was a lot of tension among the Arabs and the French people due to the French Revolution era. Some of the main characters are Marceau, Marie, Raymond, and his mistress. Both Marie and Raymond's mistress suffer from a lot of abuse during the novel, although different types. Marie struggles through emotional abuse because Marceau does not make his feelings clear to her and strings her along throughout the novel. Raymond's mistress is beat severely multiple times and also is verbally abused when Raymond calls her names. During this presentation, we will be exploring these accounts in greater detail and how the time period of the novel may have influenced how the men reacted sexually towards the women and in the name of abuse.
In the 1940s, gender roles were more prominent. Men went to work and made money while women stayed home. Men were also allowed to voice their opinions more, while women had to keep quiet in certain situations. The one thing women were not afraid to speak out about was their hope for equality.
During this time period, men saw themselves as superior and women were viewed as lazy and weak individuals that needed to be provided for by men. Also, due to the silent sexual revolution in the 1940s, men began to sexualize women's bodies and started to pay extra attention to their physical attributes. Furthermore, men abused women sexually, physically, and emotionally because growing up in a society where women were told to listen to the men made them believe this was acceptable. Men liked to be dominant. They enjoyed being the ones providing and being the main money suppliers of the home. This attitude then caused a feeling of power in the men, and if the women were not upholding their end of the stick, they were punished. Women were aware of this mistreatment and wanted it to end, therefore wanting equality and striving for feminism. Also, due to this strong sexual attitude towards women, prostitution was more prominent. Physical abuse was common among women who practiced prostitution. Women had sexual relations with men in order to obtain money, and this is where the concept of laziness in women came to be. On a similar note, some men were labeled as pimps who had complete control over the women they were in charge of and used them to make a profit.
The topic of gender mistreatment and prostitution can be directly related to Raymond and his mistress. Raymond worked and gave his woman money in return for companionship. He paid her to belong to him, meaning she could not have any relations with any other men, and she must do as he says. When Raymond found a lottery ticket belonging to her, he immediately assumed she was cheating because there was no way a woman could have paid for it herself. This represents the idea that women were lazy and were unable to provide for themselves financially. From his perception, his woman was no longer all his, which gave him the feeling of lost power. When he confronted her about it, he physically abused her, which got him arrested. After this occurrence, when Raymond was at the police station, the beating was not punished for as harshly as it would have been now, due to the unfair treatment of women in the 1940s.
To give a specific textual insight on Raymond's specific thoughts on gender roles and his view on his women in his era, we have provided the quote. To get back to what I was saying, he continued, I realized that she was cheating on me. He'd been giving her just enough to live on. He paid the rent on her room and gave her 20 francs a day for food. 300 francs for the room, 600 for food, a pair of stockings every now and then, that made it 1,000 francs. And Her Highness refused to work, but she was always telling me that things were too tight, that she couldn't get by on what I was giving her. To continue on the same topic, the quote provided states, Then he told me that he'd found a lottery ticket in her purse and she hadn't been able to explain how she paid for it. A short time later, he'd found a ticket from the shop in Montpied in her room which proved that she'd pawned 2 bracelets. Until then, he hadn't even known the bracelets existed. It was clear that she was cheating on me, so I left her.
The quote displays Raymond's views on his woman in society and how he viewed her incompetent behavior. As shown in the quote, Raymond provides a specific amount of money to her and portrays her as a lazy woman who will not work for the money on her own. This was a common thing men would say because of the fragile perception of women and how they were incapable of working and providing for the man in their life. Once he found the lottery ticket, she could not explain how she paid for it. He assumed it was from another man because women were not fit to work for themselves in his eyes. Raymond wanted to be the sole provider for her, and when he was not, it threatened his masculinity. Therefore, when she left, he felt as though he needed to beat her to teach her a lesson. He also states that he told her exactly what he thought of her, and he did this because he felt his masculinity being threatened once again. Not only that, but the time period this book is set in also had an influence. Since the mistreatment of women was not taken as seriously as it is now, Raymond did not see an issue in what he was doing and acted as though it was something the woman deserved. Also, when Marie heard Raymond beating his woman, she did not seem shocked either. This is completely different from the social structure in our society now, because sexual and physical abuse is something that is taken more seriously, and it would not have been handled the same way it was in the novel.
Before the 1940s, discussing sexual attitudes may have been considered taboo. During this era, as the idea of sex grew from the silent sexual revolution, men became to pay more attention to women and their bodily features. This is crucial to the understanding of Camus' novel because characters such as Raymond and Marceau were strictly attached to the physical aspect of the women they were involved with. To be more specific, Marceau constantly brought up Marie's physical features and how they made him feel, but never discussed her personality. He refers to how her breasts felt while they were swimming in the ocean, and then later discusses how her figure looked in her red dress. It is quite evident that Marie has strong feelings for Marceau and he does not return them. When she asks if he would like to marry him, he says sure, but also states that he would probably say the same thing to another woman. Although Marceau's indifferent personality affects his relationship with Marie, the period also affects how Marceau looked at Marie and what he specifically noticed about her. During this time period, premarital sex started to become more normal than in the past, and this could have very well influenced Marceau's sexual demeanor.
We've selected a quote that shows Marceau's physical objectification of Marie. It goes, "I let my head fall back and rest on her stomach. She didn't do anything, so I left it there. I had the whole sky in my eyes, and it was blue and gold. She had her leg pressed against mine. I was fondling her breasts. Towards the end of the show, I gave her a kiss, but not a good one." As seen in this quote, while Marceau is on his date with Marie, he is only describing physical aspects of her. This is absurd because they spend all day together talking, and he says nothing regarding her personality or their discussions. When Marceau is talking to Marie in the ocean, he is describing the way her body feels against him, and her physical appearance is all he sees. They also went back to his place at the end of the date, which hints at a potential sexual encounter. The sex culture in their society sees this act as an act of trying to get a woman to have sexual relations with a man because they are going back to a private place. It was also more common to have premarital sex, and men often desired it rather than having a real relationship.